What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. Today, I'll be doing my 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series Silly Season Predictions. I'm going to go through all the full-time entries and the part-time entries for 2025. So anyways, let's go ahead and just jump straight into it. We're going to begin by talking about the 00 car for the Haas factory team. We know RSS Racing is going to be shutting down, and they're going to have two Xfinity Series cars in 2025. We also know that Cole Custer will be moving up to the Cup Series to drive the 41 car next season. So the big question is, who is going to be driving a 00 in my opinion? My prediction right now is Ryan Preece. Ryan Preece currently drives the number 41 car for RSS Racing. I think he gets moved back down to the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think he'll be driving the number 00 car. They're going to want a veteran driver over there. I think that Ryan Preece will replace Cole Custer in a 00 car in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. Up next, how about the one car for Junior Motorsports? I think there's another driver change coming to this car as well in 2025, as I do believe that Sam Mayer will be moving up to the Cup Series, either drive for Spire or Front Row Motorsports. So who replaces him? I think it's going to be Connor Zilisch. Connor Zilisch has been linked to this ride over the course of the last few months and the last few weeks, especially since around the Chicago week, and Connor is a racing prodigy and one of the highest prospects in the lower series currently at the moment. I think Connor Zilisch will move up to the Xfinity Series full-time to drive for Junior Motorsports in the number 1 car in 2025. Up next, how about the 2 car for Richard Childress Racing? I don't expect any changes in 2025. I think Jesse Love will stay in the number 2 car in 2025. Jesse Love has been extremely impressive so far this season. The pace and the raw speed have been there all year so far, and I think that is going to continue in 2025 as he'll stay in the number 2 car next year. Up next, how about the 5 car for AR Motorsports? I don't think anything is going to change next year. I think Anthony Alfredo will drive the 5 car once again in 2025. Anthony Alfredo's had some really strong performances this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Won the Dasher Cash earlier this year at Dover. Has had some pretty strong performances. He's going to stick around with AR Motorsports and be looking to build that program up. I think he will stay with AR Motorsports, so there's probably some teams looking at him for next year. I think Anthony Alfredo will stick around and drive the 5 car in 2025. Up next, up the 7 car for Junior Motorsports. While it's not officially been announced, I do expect that Justin Allgaier will remain in the number 7 car in 2025. Justin Allgaier has been doing a really great job this year in Xfinity, has a couple wins this year. The pace and speed have been there all year, and I think Justin Allgaier, especially with him basically having Brandon as a sponsorship, that's going to be a major reason he's going to stick around with the team next year, and he'll be looking to win more championships and more races in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season with JRM. Up next, how about the 8 car for Junior Motorsports? I don't think anything changes next year. I think Sammy Smith will stay in the number 8 car next year. Sammy Smith's done not that great of a job this year at Junior Motorsports. I did expect him to run a lot better this season, but I do think Sammy Smith does have a ton of talent. And he does have some funding and sponsorship as well. So I think he'll stick around next year and will continue driving the 8 car for Junior Motorsports in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season once again. Up next, how about the 9 car for Junior Motorsports? I think there's going to be a driver change also for 2025, as I think Brandon Jones will not be full-time in this number 9 car next year due to them wanting to make a change of scenery. Who goes in the ride then? Well, my prediction is Carson Quaffle. Carson Quaffle's been doing a really great job this year in the select races that he's ran with Junior Motorsports, and I think Carson Quaffle deserves a chance and opportunity to go full-time. I think Dale Jr. is going to give him that chance and opportunity in the 2025 season to go full-time. I think he will be a championship threat and a championship contender. I think you'll see Carson Quaffle move up full-time to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2025 season. Up next, our 10 car for Kaulig Racing. Yes, I think Kaulig Racing is going to run the 10 car part-time once again next year. I think it's going to be split between Daniel Dye, Daniel Hemrick, Ross Chastain, and Shane Van Gisbergen. I think multiple Cup Series drivers will get to make some select starts to get some more experience, especially Shane Van Gisbergen, who's most likely moving up full-time to the NASCAR Cup Series next year. I think you'll see all these drivers get a chance and opportunity to make some more Xfinity Series starts in 2025. Up next, on the 11 car for Kaulig Racing. I think there's going to be a driver change also to this seat next year. I don't believe Josh Williams is going to be back. He has been struggling this year so far in the number 11 car, and while he does bring sponsorship and funding to the table, I don't expect him to be behind the wheel of this seat. So who replaces him next year? I predict that Corey LaJoie will drive the 11 car for Kaulig Racing in 2025. Corey LaJoie, of course, we know will not be returning to Spire Motorsports next year, and Bob Pockers mentioned this recently that he's been linked to potentially going to Kaulig Racing or could go to Kaulig Racing next year, especially in being sponsored by Celsius and other companies that have been associated with Kaulig Racing in the past. I think you see Corey LaJoie go back down the Xfinity Series full-time and drive for Kaulig Racing, maybe make some Select Cup Series starts with Kaulig Racing in 2025. Up next, up with the 13 car for Kaulig Racing. I think the number 97 that's been driven by Shane Van Gisbergen is going to be renumbered to the number 13, as we are expecting that Shane Van Gisbergen will move up the Cup next year. So who's going to take over the 13 car? I think it's going to be Christian Eckes. Christian Eckes has been linked to Kaulig Racing so far this silly season, while there's also a chance he can still remain in trucks with the McAnally-Hillman Racing organization. I don't think that's going to happen next year. I think Christian's a really talented race car driver, and I think they will move him up next year to the NASCAR Xfinity Series next year. I think he deserves a chance and opportunity. I think it will do a really great job and give AJ Allmendinger a run for his money at being the best driver at Kaulig Racing in 2025. Up next, up with the 14 car for RSS Greenlight Racing. I think RSS Greenlight Racing is going to come back once again in 2025 with the number 14 car, and I think it's going to be split between JJ Yeley and Davis Starr. Maybe like a Sage Karen perhaps could get a chance and opportunity in this seat as well. They're going to run all the races next year. I think Davis Starr will get the bulk share of the races next year, and I think they will for sure make a comeback and return in 2025 as they look to build up their program and get better next year. Up next, up with the 15 car for AM Racing. AM Racing has not announced who will be behind the wheel of the seat for next year. We know Hailie Deegan, of course, is not coming back to this ride in 2025. So who's going to drive the 15 car next year? My prediction is Harrison Burton. Harrison Burton, we know, will not be returning to the Wood Brothers next season and is looking for a ride. And many people have been linking him to go to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think Harrison deserves a little bit of a better opportunity, but they're going to be going after someone with sponsorship, and Harrison Burton is sponsored by Dex Imaging. So I think next year you'll see him in the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time once again. I think it will do way better than Hailie Deegan. I think he'll be contending maybe for some top 10s and maybe some top 5s. I think Harrison Burton will go over to the 15 car for AM Racing in 2025. Up next, up the 16 car for Kaulig Racing. I don't think anything's going to change for next year. I think AJ Allmendinger will be back in the 16 car in 2025. Well, he has been linked to maybe moving back up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time next year with Kaulig. They're going to need drivers with sponsorship and funding. AJ doesn't bring a lot of funding and sponsorship to the table. So therefore, next season, I think AJ Allmendinger will stay in the NASCAR Xfinity Series full-time and continue driving the number 16 car in 2025 with Kaulig. Up next, up with the 17 car for Hendrick Motorsports. Yes, I think this car will return in 2025 with multiple different drivers. I think, of course, you're going to see Kyle Larson run some select races, Chase Elliott run some select races, William Byron, Alex Bowman also will get chances and opportunity. But I also think that Roger Kroof will get behind the wheel of this car next year as well. Raj, I think, will also remain most likely full-time in the NASCAR Truck Series, but I do think in 2025, you're going to see him run quite a few Xfinity Series races as well, and maybe try to run the full season potentially, but I think he will for sure make select starts in the 17 car in 2025. Up next, up at the 18 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. I don't think any change is going into next year. I think Sheldon Creed will stay in the 18 car once again next year. Sheldon Creed's had some good performances this year, but he's also had a lot of engine issues and engine failures throughout the entire season. That being said, I think Sheldon does have a lot of talent. He's been close to winning some races as of late, and I think that's going to keep him in the seat going into the 2025 year. I think he'll get better next year, and I think he will once again be driving a Joe Gibbs Racing car once again in the 2025 season. Up next, up with the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. Very similar how they are in 2024. In 2025, this will be a rotation seat. I think you're going to see drivers like Ryan Truex, Mark Truex Jr., Bubba Wallace, Denny Hamlin, maybe Joe Graf Jr., and other drivers in Toyota, maybe Carlos Kurt Busch perhaps, or some other drivers will get the chance and opportunity to get behind the wheel. It's mostly going to be drivers with funding and sponsorship and some other drivers who will get the chance and opportunity to race the seat in 2025. Up next, up with the 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. This is going to be the All-Star car once again in 2025, and I predict John Hunter Nemechek, Ty Gibbs, Eric Almirola, and Riley Herbst will be the drivers. So Riley Herbst most likely moving up to the Cup Series with 2311 Racing. I think you're going to see this happen. I think the 20 car once again will be an All-Star entry for JGR in 2025 going for some more wins and victories. Up next, how about the 21 car for Richard Childress Racing? There aren't any changes expected. Austin Hill has a multi-year contract through 2025 with RCR, so I do expect he's going to stay around the 21. The only way he doesn't stay into next year is if he moves out to the Cup Series at RCR, but I do think that Austin Hill will continue driving a 21 car for Richard Childress Racing in 2025, and we're looking to build the program up once again. Up next, up with the 24 car for Sam Hunt Racing. I think his car is only going to run a few races in 2025. Drivers like Ed Jones, I think Sage Karam, and maybe even Kaz Gralla perhaps could be candidates for this ride going into next year. But we'll have a multitude of drivers looking to get some experience, look to run well, and I think they will once again make a comeback and return and run select races in 2025. Up next, up with the 26 car for Sam Hunt Racing. I think this car will be piloted by either a couple things. I think Corey Heim is definitely a candidate for the C going into next year. And I do think he'll run a majority of races or will run full-time at Sam Hunt. I could also see Bubba Wallace getting a few starts in this team. And I do think other drivers like John Hunter Nemechek could be candidates for this ride as well. But I do think most likely Corey Heim will get a majority of seats in this ride in the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series season. Up next, up with the 27 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. I don't expect any changes going into next year. I think Jeb Burton will get back behind the wheel of the 27 car in 2025. Jeb Burton brings sponsorship and funding to the table, and I think he's had some okay performances, but hasn't ran amazing. He does need to get better going into next year if he's going to stick around long-term with Jordan Anderson Racing, but the Anderson family really likes him. I think he will stay in the number 27 car once again in 2025. Up next, up with the 28 car for RSS Racing. I don't think anything is going to change next year. I think Kyle Sieg will run the full season in 2025. Kyle Sieg's had a couple solid performances this year, but hasn't set the world on fire. But I think because he is, of course, the brother of Ryan Sieg, he will stick around and look to get better. He's still very young, only 24 years old. I think he won't be going anywhere. I think he will be driving a 28 car once again in 2025. Up next, up with the 29 car for RSS Racing. I don't think anything changes for this car going into next year. I think Blaine Perkins is going to stick behind the wheel of the C for one more year. Blaine Perkins brings sponsorship and funding to the table, and if you're going to be in the sport, you've got to have sponsorship and funding. So therefore, I think Blaine sticks around. I hopefully will see him get better, but he will for sure stick around and drive the number 29 car in 2025. Up next, up with the 30 car for Rhett Jones Racing. I think Rhett Jones Racing is going to run a lot of races in 2025, working with the Haas factory team. I think you're going to see drivers like Noah Gragson, Sam Mayer, Todd Gillen, and Cole Custer get in the seat going into next year. I think it'll run around 10 to 15 races for sure. I think mainly Cup guys will get behind the wheel. Maybe some outside drivers like a Bubba Pollard perhaps could get behind the wheel of this seat. But I do think they're going to run some races, have a Haas factory alliance, and try to make as many races as they can in 2025. Up next, up with the 31 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. I don't think anything is going to change going into next year. I think Parker Ressa will be back in the 31 car in 2025. Parker Ressa's done an okay job this year, but hasn't really set the world on fire. But I think he's got a ton of talent, and he does have some Cup aspirations. I think in the future, we might see him in a Cup Series car with a team like Beer Motorsports once again. But I do think he'll be back with Jordan Anderson Racing to look to try to build up that program going into the 2025 NASCAR season. Up next, up with the 32 car for Jordan Anderson Racing. I think this is going to be a part-time entry going into 2025 with Jordan Anderson getting behind the wheel. And I think Austin Green, who's made a lot of select starts with this team on all the road courses and making a couple other starts this year, could also run full-time with this team. But I do think you'll see Jordan Anderson Racing and Austin Green split the ride for a majority of the year in the 2025 year as this team looks to build up and get their program a lot better. Up next, up at the 33 car for Richard Childress Racing. I think RCR is going to run a third part-time entry in 2025 to try to help get the 33 some owners points. I think you're going to see drivers like Kyle Busch, Austin Dillon, and Ty Dillon, and maybe if Daniel Suarez get behind the wheel of the C going into next year. We are expecting that Kyle Busch is going to be back with RCR in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, so I think he will be back and running some select races in Xfinity next year. Same with Austin Dillon and Ty Dillon in 2025. Up next, how about the 35 car for Joey Gase Motorsports? Yes, I think his team will be back in 2025, and I think it's only going to be Joey Gase behind the wheel. He's had drivers like Dawson Cramp in the past, and Frankie Muniz get the chance and opportunity, but I think Joey Gase will run every single race next year, as he'll be looking to get as much sponsorship and funding as possible. I think you see Joey Gase run the whole entire year in 2025 with Ford funding. Up next, how about the 36 car for DGM Racing? I think this is going to be a part-time entry in 2025, and I think it's mostly going to be driven by Natalie Decker and Josh Valicki. I think Natalie Decker is going to make around 5 to 6 starts with his team next year, and I think Josh Valicki will get a ton of starts. He might also get an opportunity with JGR going into 2025, but I do think you're going to see these two drivers be the drivers who will run a majority of races with DGM Racing in 2025. Up next, how about a 38 car for Viking Motorsports? I don't think that anything is going to change in 2025. I think Matt Benedetto will be back full-time with Viking Motorsports in 2025. Matt Benedetto does have a little bit of funding with him going through the rest of this season, and I do think that they want him to stick around to try to continue helping to build the program up. They've done some great things so far this year. He's had some good runs and performances. I think he will for sure stick around and continue driving the 38 car as he looks to build that program up going into the rest of 2025. Up next, how about the 39 car for RSS Racing? I don't expect any changes in 2025. I think Ryan Sieg will stick behind the wheel of this car next year. Ryan has been driving the 39 car for nearly over a decade at this point, and nothing I think will change unless someone tries to buy it out at this point. But he's been doing a really great job, has a chance to make the playoffs this year in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, and I think that's going to lead to him continue to try to build this program up and get the team a lot better. Up next, how about the 42 car for Young's Motorsports? I don't think that anything's going to change for this team. I think Leland Honeyman will be back behind the wheel of this seat in 2025. Leland Honeyman's been doing a really solid job at times this year, and Young's Motorsports really likes him. He's got a lot of talent. He brings funding with him. They've done some great things so far this year. He's got a ton of great performances, and I think he'll stay behind the wheel of the number 42 car throughout the 2025 NASCAR Xfinity season. Up next, how about the 43 car for Alpha Prime Racing? I don't think if anything's going to change next year. I think Ryan Ellis will be driving every single race in this seat once again in 2025. Ryan Ellis has had some good performances, but also not great performances this year. But a lot of that's been equipment at times and engine failures, among other things. So I don't think if anything's going to change next year. I think you will see Ryan Ellis stick around for sure and stay in the 43 car once again in 2025. Up next, how about the 44 car for Alpha Prime Racing? I don't expect any changes for this seat going into 2025. I think Brendan Poole will be back behind the wheel of this seat again. Brendan Poole's had some good performances. He's been in the top 20 a lot of this year in the standings. I think he's in the top 18 in the points, and I think he could have an outside chance of making the playoffs next year. I think he's going to do great next year. I think he once again will be back behind the wheel of the number 44 car with Alpha Prime Racing in 2025 in Xfinity. Up next, how about the 45 car for Alpha Prime Racing? I think this is going to be a part-time entry in 2025 with drivers like Cesar Baccarella and Josh Williams. I already talked about Josh Williams not being back with Kaulig. I think he'll run select races with Alpha Prime and also run full-time potentially with DGM Racing going into next year. I think this will only run a few select races, and I think it will be looking just to get some extra money for the organization throughout 2025. Up next, how about the 48 car for Big Machine Racing? I don't expect any changes for 2025. I believe Parker Clergan will be back behind the wheel of this car next year. Parker's had a really great year so far. His second year with this team full-time has been extremely impressive. The pace and speed has been there, and I've been so impressed with the runs he's had at times. I think he's six behind the wheel, looks to continue trying to get him some wins. He's been close to winning a few races, and I could see him winning a NASCAR Xfinity Series race before the end of 2025 with this team. Up next, how about the 51 car for Jeremy Clements Racing? There won't be any changes for next year. I think Jeremy Clements will be back behind the wheel of this seat next year. Now, I think they'll be looking to get their program a lot better. They've been struggling in recent years and recent seasons, but I think if anyone can really help build their program back up, it is definitely Jeremy Clements. He's got a lot of talent. He's been doing a good job so far this year at times, though he hasn't really set the world on fire. He'll be looking to help get this team back up into shape in 2025, in my opinion. Up next, how about the 6.6 car for NBM Motorsports? I think his team's going to run some select races next year, maybe even full-time, and I think Timmy Hill is going to be the driver. Timmy brings a little sponsorship and funding with him, while yes, he'll be focused on his Truck Series program as well. In my opinion, going into next year, I think you'll see Timmy Hill back in the 6.6 car as well for a ton of races, and you might see Davis Starr if he doesn't drive the other seat. But I do think Timmy Hill will get quite a few starts and opportunities. I think he'll be behind the wheel of the 6.6 car once again in 2025. Up next, how about the 77 car for Spire Motorsports? Yes, I think Spire Motorsports is going to bring back the 77 car for pretty much the whole entire year. I think Brandon Jones is going to drive a majority of races in this C since you're going to be looking for drivers with sponsorship and funding. I could also see a driver like Kyle Busch getting behind the wheel this ride and maybe even Kyle Larson as well. I think Brandon Jones get majority starts. I think Nick Sanchez will make a few starts, and I think Raj Kroof could also be a candidate to get behind the wheel of the seat. And they're also, I think, going to have a JRM alliance in 2025. Up next, how about the 81 car for Joe Gibbs Racing? I don't think anything's going to change going into next year. I think Chandler Smith will be back behind the wheel of the 81 car in 2025. Chandler Smith brings sponsorship and funding with him, and he's done a really solid job in Xfinity, already having 2 wins so far this year. And while at one point he was rumored to be moving up to the NASCAR Cup Series full-time, he's not going to be in a Cup Series ride at all next year. So I think in 2025, he's going to stay 1 more year with JGR while he potentially waits for Denny Hamlin to retire. And I do think that Chandler Smith will be in Cup full-time potentially in 2026, but I do think he'll once again be back behind the wheel of the number 81 car once again in 2025. Up next, how about the 88 car for Junior Motorsports? I think this 88 car is going to run a lot of races next year. I think Kyle Larson's going to make a few starts in this ride. I think you're going to see Bubba Pollard potentially. I also think Corey Day will make his Xfinity Series debut in this seat. I think Chase Elliott as well. In the races, you don't see those drivers. I think you're going to see Brandon Jones make the rest of the start. So I think they're actually going to try to run this car full time. I think you'll see a lot of races with this car once again. And maybe if Dale Jr. wants to come back and do another race in 2025, though he could retire, we could see Dale Jr. get that chance in 2025. Up next, how about the 91 car for DGM Racing? I don't expect any changes going into next year. I think Kyle Weatherman will be back behind the wheel of this car. Kyle Weatherman's been very impressive with DGM Racing, and while I think a faster team and organization should probably look at Kyle Weatherman, I don't think they're going to. So I think they're going to keep him going into next year. He's done a lot of great things with DGM Racing, has some stand-up performances, and I do think he'll once again be back on the wheel of the number 91 car for DGM Racing in 2025 as he looks to continue helping this team grow. Up next, how about the 92 car for DGM Racing? I think this is going to be a ride that is occupied by only Josh Williams. I don't think it's going to run all year, but I think Josh is done with Kaulig Racing. He's been struggling with the team this year, and I think that DGM Racing will welcome back with open arms. I think Josh has talent, don't get me wrong, but I feel like being a team like DGM is looking to continue building their program up. You need someone like Josh to really help that out. So I think Josh Williams won't be back with Kaulig, and instead will be driving for DGM Racing in 2025 as he looks to try to help them grow once again. And finally, let's talk about the 98 car for Toss Factory Team. It's expected that Riley Hurts will be moving up to the Cup Series next year in 2025, meaning they're going to be needing a new driver. So who's getting behind the wheel of this number 98 car next year? I think it's going to be Hailie Deegan. Hailie Deegan's name has been linked and rumored over the course of the last couple of weeks, really since Indianapolis about 2 weeks ago. We know Joe Custer has said that they've had conversations and have talked to her. And even though some have said Harrison Burr might get behind the wheel, I think it's going to be Hailie Deegan. Look, Hailie Deegan might not be the best driver out there in the world, but she does bring sponsorship and funding to the table, which I think will lead to her getting an opportunity to race in the NASCAR Xfinity Series once again in 2025, which she'll be looking to make the playoffs next year. I think Hailie Deegan will be driving behind the wheel of this seat going into 2025 as she looks to build this program up next year and next season. So, those are my 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series silly season predictions. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support on Patreon as well. Links description below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your 2025 NASCAR Xfinity Series silly season predictions? Let me know them in the comments below. I don't think any more content dropping today on the channel. Tomorrow we're probably going to have top 10 NASCAR prospects, probably a silly season update potentially. We might have a NASCAR news video drop dropping on Friday or maybe Saturday potentially. We're probably going to have silly season predictions dropping once again for 2025, and I got a lot of great content dropping over the course of the next couple weeks that I can't wait for you guys to check out, as we'll be having some racing once again in about a week or so. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.